Welcome to a deeper dive with Dara Cam from sitting here in my wheelchair at the Lafayette Park Rehab Center. I've got, I hope, 8 more weeks to go till I can get back in the terracotta room. But you want to listen to us today. We've got Jim Rosica, editor-in-chief of City and State Florida, and News Service of Florida ACE education reporter Ryan Dailey, who's the producer of A Deeper Dive, joining us to talk about all things higher education and guns, as well as Governor Ron DeSantis' latest budget proposal. Stick with us. It's a fun-packed fun time.
The governor is targeting, what he calls trendy ideology in higher education. And these budget requests that I just mentioned, I think they point toward a, let's get new blood into our faculty and our university and college system.
You're listening to A Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by City and State Florida.
Hello and welcome to A Deeper Dive with me, Dara Cam.
And me, Jim Rosica.
And editor-in-chief of City and State Florida, Jim Rosica. Two Mooks.
That is correct.
It's the Two Mooks episode. It's sometimes monthly, sometimes not monthly. I am joined, Jim is in the terracotta room, and I am joined in my home at the Lafayette Park Rehab Center by Ryan Dailey, News Service of Florida ACE education reporter. He is also the producer of Deeper Dive. So we're really excited to have him on the other side of the mic today. Welcome to you, Ryan.
Thank you. It's good to be on the mic. Only took me 27 episodes, but I'm here.
But it's counting. So we have a lot to dive into this week, Jim. We haven't met in a while, and it is our governor, Ron DeSantis, who is rumored or speculated to be considering a run for president in 2024. He has been rocking and rolling and making national headlines every day for the week that this episode will be coming out on Sunday. We are recording it a little bit earlier than that. So let's jump right into it. The governor this week released his budget, his fifth state budget proposal. City and State had an interesting story about some of the elements in that budget. Why don't you give us some highlights and tell us a little bit give us some color from what took place in the room as he made his historic $114+ billion budget proposal announcement.
Sure. And certainly one of the things that we noted and a lot of the other media outlets noted is the differences in this governor in how he interacts with the public and the press, vastly different from certainly his predecessor, Rick Scott, and his predecessors, Jeb Bush and Charlie Crist, and even different from when he first started as a very young first termer. The budget rollout, and if Dara, you'll remember in the olden days, governors, certainly Governor Rick Scott, used to debut their proposed state budget at what was fondly called AP Day, when the Associated Press would have a meeting of the minds, and the governor and lieutenant governor and Senate president and House Speaker and everybody would come and give a speech and take questions for a half an hour. The AP Day has been suspended, obviously, during the pandemic, and it's doubtful whether it will ever return, because certainly this governor would never participate in something like that. But what he did yesterday was he had his budget rollout in the cabinet meeting room in the lower level of the Capitol, and there were unusually a whole bunch of staffers were in the room, the cabinet meeting room. I was not there. I saw it on TV, but all of the reporters were apparently on the sides and in the back, and all of the staffers were informed before the event occurred, before the governor came out, to clap a lot and show high energy. And so Tristan Wood, our staff writer at City and State Florida, led with that little tidbit before he got into his take, his analysis for us that went online yesterday and is on top of our website now, was about how many of the things that the governor highlighted in his budget are many of the same things that the conservative red meat base will like. And so even though this governor has deflected questions about his future political ambitions, specifically for 2024, his professional and campaign staff will never call to complain if you do stories about it. So, Dara, you tell me specifically what you're interested in, and I'll see if I can do a deeper dive on one or more.
I think it's interesting. We can talk about the higher education stuff in a second with Ryan, but it is interesting that they recruited staff to treat this announcement in much like a lot of his press conferences that we see are more like political rallies than like a press conference. And it's not that unusual for a governor to do a presentation of the budget in the cabinet room. I remember Governor Bush doing that maybe once or twice, if my memory serves me right. But, you know, the idea that you would that this is what is normal in DeSantis land. You know, anytime he
DeSantis
anytime he makes an appearance, it is very much populated by supporters. And geez, the other day I was watching one. I can't remember where it was. Maybe one of you guys can. And he was at the podium making some announcement and asked if there were any questions, and there were no questions. So I don't know if there were no reporters there to ask any questions, or if they were taken off guard, or
that was in Auburndale.
Auburndale. So I was sitting here waiting for the governor to take some questions, and he didn't. But so let's talk about what were the issues in the budget that Tristan thought would be kind of seen as red meat. I think one of them might be the immigration issue. I've written about the relocation of undocumented immigrants or migrants out of Florida. The governor again made national headlines last year when several dozen or 24 or so migrants, the state of Florida, transported them by charter plane from San Antonio to Martha's Vineyard.
And before we get too far afield, I in danger of me getting too far afield, before I lose this conversational thread, you raise an interesting question about the fact that I think we in the press need to probably stop calling these press conferences, because they're really not. I think your point is very well taken about them having more of a flavor of political rallies. Press conferences are what you do when you've got a room or an event and there's a podium and there's a person speaking and there's a bunch of reporters and camera people. I think the press is very secondary to what this governor does in what they call press conferences, which is there's it's largely populated with supporters, and that's all fine. That's all good. But I think that we need to come up with another name for them.
Appearance
or not, I don't know.
Appearance?
Maybe we just need to start calling them appearances.
Right.
But I think calling them press conferences is a bit of a misnomer,
Right.
given the way that he has kind of reinvented the art.
Okay.
Pardon, I'm getting off of my soapbox now. One of the things in his proposed budget, and I guess we need to say right off the top, is that, the governor is statutorily required to propose a budget. The legislature is in no way obliged to follow it. Although politically speaking, it would probably be good for them to follow a lot of what he wants
Which they do.
to show up in their budget.
Which they do.
Which they do. But the regime is that the legislature writes the budget, the legislature passes the budget, and then the governor, any governor, has line item veto authority over items in the budget, and then signs it, which is how a budget becomes law. Just so we're not confusing people. That being said, going back to your original question, one of the things in this budget, in this proposed budget for the fiscal year 23-24, Florida's fiscal year start July 1 and they run till June 30th of every year, is $20 million for what he's calling the unauthorized alien relocation program. I might not have that exactly correct, but that's obviously an extension of what he's been doing.
$12 million, I think.
I'm sorry. Thank you we're correcting each other. That's good.
Yes, that is good, because we're pals. The unauthorized alien transport program, I believe
program.
Right.
Okay.
They put $12 million into the budget for that last year. I believe that's the same amount of money. I can't remember, but yeah, he isn't backing down from that fight of transporting migrants out of Florida. The idea was, I guess we all thought, including some legislators, thought that money was going to be used to transport undocumented immigrants or migrants from Florida to elsewhere. The money last year was used, it was over $1 million for charter planes to pick up migrants in San Antonio. The plane made a pit stop in the Panhandle in Florida and then went on to Martha's Vineyard. So, questionable whether that actually fulfilled the purpose of the program or not. That's in litigation. So let's move on to academia. We can maybe shift out of the budget into let's have Ryan take a swipe at the governor's attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Sure. So even before Wednesday's budget rollout by the governor, I believe Tuesday, the day before that, DeSantis rolled out 2 of the higher education related requests that he's making to the legislature that fit into this larger effort by the governor to sort of try to remake higher education, much of it is concentrated on small liberal arts school, New College of Florida,
right,
in Sarasota. And those 2 prongs of the request are for the coming fiscal year to have $15 million allocated to recruiting new faculty to New College of Florida. And then from the larger higher education system in Florida standpoint, $100 million in the budget to do the same thing system-wide.
To try to reshape, this is part of the governor's kind of anti-woke agenda, that to reshape the state's college system, which I think, by the way, we should mention that even the Board of Governors Chancellor Ray Rodriguez, when he was joining Governor DeSantis at this press conference on Tuesday, or this availability Tuesday,
Thank you.
He did mention that Florida has been ranked in the top 5, right, in terms of state
public higher education
systems, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there's been a lot of touting of the successes. Like,
Right.
for instance, I think we have two universities in the U.S. News and World Report top 20. I want to say public universities in the nation, which would be, as my memory serves, that would be University of Florida, the flagship university in the state, at number 5, and I think Florida State University at number 19. So there are, when those rankings come out, there are plenty of victory laps, from people at the universities, understandably, but also the governor has touted that. I remember being at a press conference at Florida State where the governor was there. I think when they cracked the top 20, which would have been a few years ago. But fast forward to today, and I mean, I think this has been building for a long time, and we've used this in numerous stories that we've written. But the governor is targeting what he calls trendy ideology in higher education, and these budget requests that I just mentioned. I mean, I think they point toward a let's get new blood into our faculty and our university
Right.
and college system, and all of this is happening concurrently with an effort to basically zero out funding in the higher education system on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, which it looks like DeSantis and his team are trying to be the tip of the spear in sort of taking that down.
Anti-woke. I mean, I just don't know another better way of, it might be a little crass and unsophisticated, but I don't really know a better way of framing it. But and all of that, also some context for that is to help, this money for the new hiring of faculty to help kind of maybe purge the system of ideological, those, I guess they want a different ideology.
Well, sure.
So to do that, he's also proposing changes to the tenure system, which just underwent some changes, to make it easier for presidents to hire and fire faculty.
Correct. To add a little bit to that, as far as tenure goes, during the 2022 legislative session, the legislature passed a bill, and DeSantis signed the bill to one of the pieces. It's pretty wide ranging, but one of the pieces is it essentially would require a 5-year post tenure review for tenured faculty. What DeSantis is proposing now is to empower boards of trustees and university presidents to require, they could call for a post tenure review at any time and as often as they want.
Boards of trustees are appointed by the governor, and the boards of trustees appoint the presidents.
Yes.
Okay, so it would give the executive more control
I believe
indirectly.
the governor has a certain amount of,
Right.
Yeah, I think I want to say statutorily it's the governor can appoint 6 members to a
Right.
13-member board of trustees. And interestingly enough, at New College of Florida, the aforementioned New College of Florida, DeSantis just recently appointed his maximum of 6 members, conservative members, including conservative allies of his, including Chris Rufo of the Manhattan Institute. So all of these things are in concert with each other and sort of set up a legislative session that I think, as long as I've been covering the legislature, I haven't seen it building toward having this much of a focus on higher education, at least on these points. These, remaking the system, if that's what you want to call it. But a big piece of that is the diversity, equity, inclusion effort that the governor is undertaking, which, by the way, is not a nebulous, let's see what, fact-finding mission. I mean, they already have received reports from at least the university system as we speak today. They've received reports from each of the state's 12 universities on exactly how much they are spending on programs related to diversity, equity, inclusion, offices that, promote these things, and the paid positions within those offices, not only how much the universities are spending, but how much of that money is coming from the state. So after that data, that information was returned to the state, DeSantis this week came back to the table and said, we're doing away. No mas. We're doing away with all of that spending.
Right. So what, for example, would be something that would be offered on campus that would be a diversity, equity, and inclusion program that the state will no longer offer?
So there was a little bit of variation in the way the universities answered. Some of it was, they basically were given a blank, like what looked like a spreadsheet. Fill this out with all of your expenditures that relate to these things. Some examples of those things are offices. Like I believe the University of Florida has I can't remember its exact name, but they listed it under something that would qualify for these expenses. They have an office that deals with diversity, equity, inclusion issues, and I think it had something like 4 full-time employees, and that was a fairly significant part of their spending on DEI, which totaled some in the millions. I think I'm going off of memory, but I think north of $4 million, and a good portion of that was from the state. USF in Tampa had something similar in office, but universities also listed classes, actual courses that students can take.
Thanks, Max. That was Max giving us a little sideshow.
A little jazz.
Yeah.
So I mean, it ranges from offices that handle issues related to again, I'm using the DEI just to shorten it a little bit, to classes, to paid positions.
As we said, the governor is putting an end to all that. What's kind of pushback? I would imagine that the faculty might not be so thrilled with this proposed overhaul. What the faculty union, at least, what kind of pushback is the governor getting on these proposals? And I was just reminding listeners that the governor has a Republican-controlled House and Senate who have shown in the past year or two that they are very amenable to taking their cues from him and passing his priorities.
Yeah, so the United Faculty of Florida Faculty Union, their president, Andrew Gothard, who is a professor at Florida Atlantic University, he released a pretty lengthy statement on, I believe it was Tuesday, the day that the governor rolled out his zeroing out DEI spending proposal. And I'm just going to read, the first paragraph of the statement, which I think is kind of speaking to the larger effort to remake higher education. He says, Florida's students and families don't need their government to tell them which classes they can take, which degrees they can complete, or what kind of campus activities they can engage in. The constitutional rights promised to all Americans do not come with an asterisk that says, unless Governor DeSantis disagrees with you. All Floridians of all political affiliations should be outraged by these efforts to curtail speech, belief, and association in our state's higher education system. So the faculty union is pretty much sounding off on all of these things, and I would say it's fairly substantial pushback. And as these things have been rolled out, I've also seen kind of here and there, one-off op-eds from people who work in universities and such. So, there is sort of a building line of criticism to these efforts from people who are actually in the system.
So let's talk about, just seems like not really much they can do to try to curb that. But let's talk a little bit about New College. all of this happened in like a 3-day span. So the governor now has 6 appointees. I thought he had a majority on the new college board, but I guess, is there a student?
I think probably in a roundabout way he does, because if I'm not mistaken, after DeSantis made his 6 appointments, and again, it's a 13-member board, the board of governors subsequently, which is made up of primarily DeSantis appointees,
Right.
if not all at this point, I'm not sure. The board of governors appointed what would be, I think, a 7th. So
Okay.
I think that would pretty much make up a majority, if you're looking at it that way.
So what happened at New College this week? I have a little anecdote about that. My best friend's grandson is in school there right now, and I'll tell you a little bit about his take on the events that are developing.
Sure, I'm sure it was closely watched by most, if not all, of the. I think they had a pretty heavy student and community member turnout. But on Tuesday, same day as the DEI proposal, the revamped, remade New College Board met for the first time. And in a meeting that I sometimes use the term "at times tense," this one was the whole time tense.
Right.
In a meeting that was, very tense.
Yeah.
I mean, the big takeaway was that the board voted essentially to fire the school's president, Patricia Oker, and replace her on an interim basis with former Republican Speaker of the House and State Education Commissioner Richard Corcoran, who has been at least in his time as Education Commissioner, a top lieutenant of Governor DeSantis, who spearheaded the DeSantis's fight against critical race theory.
Just a reminder, Richard Corcoran, a self-described disruptor. I think people who might not be in Florida might not be as familiar with New College as those of us who are homegrown. I grew up in Florida. Ryan, you grew up in Florida. New College is seen as a liberal arts, progressive, very small campus. I think fewer than 1,000
I think
students.
it's something like 700. It's very small.
Right. And a friend of mine, 2 of her children graduated from New College. I was telling Ryan earlier, one of them is an epidemiologist, tenured professor at Wake Forest. And the other is a psychiatrist who served in the Navy, who was stationed at times in Guantanamo and in Iraq. And so these are people who have, these are very, I don't know how to frame it, but these are people who are very successful and got a very good liberal arts education and went on to do pretty great things. So anyway, one of my friend's children's sons now is attending at New College, so a legacy at New College. And what I have heard from their family is that there is a lot of concern among the alumni and parents about these changes in the middle of the school year, and that many students may be considering withdrawing or transferring, and that students who have been accepted for the fall semester are maybe not going to follow up on that, and they're going to seek their education elsewhere. So we'll see what happens, right?
In New College, just kind of again, for anyone who doesn't have much of an understanding of the school, and my apologies if I butcher this or get anything wrong in this way. I'm being kind of like approximate here, but I think New College kind of approaches academics in a really pretty unique way. My understanding is that the learning to a degree is kind of like self-directed by students, and I think they have a sort of unique way in which they actually grade. Like,
I thought they got pass fail.
yeah, I don't know. I think it's
They
pretty.
used to, I think, or something like that. But
It's pretty unconventional
Right.
in the way that they. It's just a very. It's sort of known as a very unique, kind of. I think free-spirited campus and school.
which and remaking it in the ilk of a Hillsdale college might be kind of the antithesis of the kind of school that the folks who are there now or who are applying there might have been seeking when they sought out new college. So the governor's really, but he wants to flip this on its head, and it looks like that is what's going to be happening. And we'll see what Richard Corcoran does as the interim president there.
Right. I mean, Corcoran himself wasn't at the meeting on Tuesday. One of the new board members, I believe his name is Matthew Spalding. I hope I'm not getting his first name wrong. He kind of spoke for Corcoran in the sense that he said that me and Corcoran are old friends and he would absolutely accept the job. He spoke on behalf of Corcoran, even in saying that Corcoran would accept the interim president job, and Corcoran is available to start in March. In the meantime, someone from the school's president's office, I think their chief of staff, is going to step in until then because they have to have someone at the helm.
Thanks for listening. We'll be right back with Jim Rosica and Ryan Dailey.
Here at Deeper Dive, we want to hear from you, the listeners. We invite you to send your questions, comments, and feedback to our mailbag. You can reach us at deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. That's deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. Get your 2 cents in by sending us an email.
Welcome back to a deeper dive with Dara. So we've got 2 more things on our agenda today. 2 more big, kind of national news. One, both of them are, not kind of. Again, in higher education, and then Ryan, you'll be off the hook. The Advanced Placement African American Studies course. This has been a kerfuffle. The Governor DeSantis's Department of Education ixnayed that course because it had items in it such as queer studies and a couple other issues that were included in the curriculum for this course, and they said not just no, but hell no, and we're not teaching that in Florida.
Yeah, you are not lying. It has been a kerfuffle, and basically what happened with that course, the College Board, which develops advanced placement courses, college level courses offered to high school students for college credit. They had a course in development, advanced placement African American Studies. The state objected. The State Department of Education, very loudly and publicly objected to various topics that were taught in the course, that were slated to be taught in the course, which was, again, under development. Some of those topics, Dara, I think you mentioned this. It was, I think it was Black queer theory. I want to say
Black queer studies.
It was, yes, Black queer studies.
Black feminist literary thought and movement for Black lives, intersectionality and activism, and the reparations movement.
Yes. And within those topics, there were authors whose works would have been required reading that the Department of Education put out, essentially like an infographic that broke down, here's this topic.
A chart. Isn't an infographic a chart?
Yeah, I'm being fancy. So, this topic, and we have this problem with it. This author, who is like one of the authors whose name is escaping me at the moment, the department pointed out that, this author has written various works on intersectionality. That's one concept that they
Bell hooks
took issue with. Yes. So, so that gives you a sense. I think there was something like 5 or 6 specific topics that they took issue with. So this was last month, getting toward the end of January, that this came out. It sort of ruffled a lot of feathers. Various black faith leaders came together to raise concerns about this. Prominent civil rights attorney Ben Crump came to the Florida Capitol to threaten a lawsuit. The Department of Education essentially told the College Board, this isn't going to be in Florida classrooms unless some changes are made. The college... And then, ta-da...
Yes. I think it's this one.
Yeah, that's probably a little more appropriate. So the College Board said February 1st, we're going to release this updated framework for the course. So kind of all eyes were on Wednesday when that...
Lo and behold.
When that framework was released, with a lengthy statement, by the way, that included a paragraph that said something to the effect of, districts and states hadn't seen this. The changes were made based on feedback from, I think students and teachers. But many, I think maybe all of the topics that had been raised as concerns by the Department of Education were gone. I think most, if not all, of the authors whose works the department took issue with were scrubbed from the course. So as we sit here today, I don't know that the DeSantis administration or the Department of Education, I reached out to the Department of Education. I don't know that they have commented one way or the other, whether these revisions have placated them and they will accept the course. I haven't seen that yet, but I do know that the changes certainly reflect that it certainly seems like someone was listening. And again, this course would not only be taught and offered to Florida students. This would be the AP African American Studies course
for the whole country.
Yeah, so anyone who would take it in whatever state would be taking the revised version that, if you are taking the College Board at its word that DeSantis' and the department's concerns weren't taken into account. But I've got to think that some eyebrows are raised and wondering if they really were. I see that a hand has been raised.
Somebody wants to weigh in here. You need to just butt in like I do.
Right.
We're family. That's
hi,
how we communicate.
Jim Rosica here, longtime listener, first time caller. Should we be surprised at all that the Department of Education did not issue that they did not take a victory lap on this and issue some kind of press statement via the emails?
Well, that's a good question, and I was wondering that myself yesterday because I wrote a story about this, and of course the first people I reached out to was the department itself. So I've got to wonder if that's still just like under review, and I'll tell you why I think that there might be a delay on that. It's a little complicated to explain, but in the framework for this course, there is a section of it that is something to the effect of examples of debate topics to be used within the course that would not be required within the course, but optional. And again, examples of topics that you could, I guess, riff on for debates. One of the things in there, if I'm not mistaken, was intersectionality, something to do with intersectionality. I think something about Black Lives Matter was in there, and Black conservatism as well.
There may still be issues, and there may be topics or components of this that the DeSantis administration continues to have agita with.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm driving at, is that,
Yeah.
this was something like a 265-page document. It is a big old framework, I'm sure, as frameworks go. And I would not be surprised if there are some people at the Department of Education poring over all this stuff, and that what would be a victory lap is sort of on hold, maybe, until, they get their ducks in a row.
It passes their litmus test.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
that would be my guess.
So here's, let's wrap it up. And I thought I was going to let you off the hook, but I see I'm pulling up the story as we speak. And you actually also covered this the week that got kicked off. House Speaker Paul Renner kicked off the week that was by announcing that the Florida House was going to pass a sweeping gun bill that would no longer require state licensing to carry a concealed weapon. He called it an effort to, quote, remove the government permission slip. Now, this is something that has percolated over the years. All three of us know this. I've written about it before. Jim, I'm sure you have as well. What was interesting to me that seemed to be a shift was from past efforts to accomplish this was that the president of the Florida Sheriff's Association, Hernando County Sheriff Al Nienhuis, I apologize if I butchered that, Sheriff, who's president of the Florida Sheriff's Association, was standing right by Speaker Renner's side when he made this announcement and endorsed this proposal. And I think he said that the Sheriff's Association also backed the bill. This is something that law enforcement officials have fiercely opposed in previous years. Why do you think, Jim, maybe this question for you, why do you think what's the shift now? Is it a shift in the ideology of the sheriffs, or is it a desire to, this is something the governor also wants, is a desire to make sure that the governor succeeds in getting his priorities passed?
I'm going to defer to Ryan on this since he wrote the actual story.
I'm from the historical perspective. I'm not really sure.
Okay, well, I'll answer.
Yeah, no. Please do.
I think there is a shift towards. I think that the state as a whole, Jim, Rosica, and I have talked about this before, has become more conservative over the past decade or so. And I think that the governor is kind of a rock star in law enforcement circles, and this is an effort to try to appease the governor and possibly, score points with the NRA and the state's many gun owners in advance of 2024. We have over 2 million folks in Florida have a license to carry and already, and that is the people who have to undergo certain background screening. The biggest difference with this proposal from what we currently have is you still would have to undergo, you still could not carry concealed, it's called constitutional carry. You still couldn't carry if you're a convicted felon, but you do not have to have the training that is required now in order to get a concealed weapons license.
Yeah.
So tell me about what the chatter is about this shift.
Well, House Speaker Paul Renner made that clear, that with what this bill would bring, it would remove essentially all things relevant to the permit process, which part of that would be the firearms training, And that kind of caught immediate backlash from Democrats, who, I mean, I guess to broad brush their argument, you would have more people with guns with less training on guns. And, I think that has caused concern for them. But yes, it would. I had a quote from the House Speaker in the story that had something to do with, all parts of the permitting process would be wiped out. You still could get a permit. The legislation wouldn't like outlaw getting a permit. If you wanted to get a permit, you could. But Renner said that it's, quote, important but not required, end quote, for gun owners to take courses on things such as firearm safety, under the bill.
I believe critics of this proposal have argued that states where they have passed similar measures have seen an increase in gun violence, and I'm going to study up on that before next week's guest. We have a special guest coming up next week. I'm not going to give it away, but hey, people, stay tuned because you're not going to want to miss that. I'm just one of the House Democrats who spoke out against this proposal was Christine Hunchofsky, who represents Parkland, where the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas mass shooting took place almost 5 years ago. And she said, this is not constitutional carry, this is untrained carry. We have to be very clear and specific as to what this legislation does, and that is to remove the training requirement, and you will no longer have the check if you have something disqualifying you in your criminal record. So there's a lot of angst about it, but really there's nothing the Democrats can do to stop it.
Yes, I mean as you and Jim have talked about before, that the Republicans are completely running the table. They have, I don't know if I'm wrong in saying this, but unprecedented majority.
Yes, super majorities in both the House and the Senate.
So, I mean, this being rolled out by the House Speaker, pretty much seals the deal. I mean, yeah. We'll see if any changes are made just during the process to the bill, but I mean, I wouldn't hold my breath on that. And I wanted to mention here at the bottom of this story that I wrote on, I think it was Monday, Renner, took jabs at local officials for, quote, creating an unsafe environment. I think he was answering a question from a reporter, but he says, quote, we don't operate in a vacuum. What's happening in our society right now is defund the police 2.0. With these cities and counties and woke prosecutors that are advocating for no bail on third-degree felonies. So I don't think there's ever been a time in my history here on Earth that we've needed the right to bear arms for individuals more than we do now, end quote. So that's kind of a, good guy with a gun kind of mentality, if the streets are unsafe.
I just don't even know what to say in response to that. So let me try to draw... Ross, thank you for your reporting this week. You've been a busy beaver. And Jim, Rosica, what else happened this week? Is there anything else that we need to touch on for our listeners?
I honestly can't think of anything.
Okay, well then we'll just wrap it there. Well, and there you have it. Ryan Dailey, ace education reporter with the News Service of Florida. Thank you so much for joining us on the other side of the mic this week on A Deeper Dive.
It was a pleasure to join the Dara and Rosica Variety Hour for the first time.
And Jim, it was great meeting up with you again. I hope I get to be in the terracotta room in about 8 weeks. We'll see what the orthopedist says in a couple of days. But thanks for joining us today. And next time, we'll let you get your 2 cents worth in.
That's fine. I enjoyed being able to sit back on this one and enjoy the terracotta room all to myself, which was actually kind of weird. I will say that I did get, as anybody who knows me knows, I get very excited when my shipment of new Sharpies comes in, and I got my shipment of new Sharpies. So I'll be leaving you your own fine point Sharpie in the terracotta room.
Oh, I love
I'm
Sharpies.
putting it on the desk right now.
Okay, thank you. So is it the kind that you click, or do you have to take the cap off?
Oh, I can't afford the one that you have to. I mean, I'm on a budget. I'm on a budget here. You know, this is the cap one. Yes, of course.
There we go. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
See ya.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
A Deeper Dive with Dara is a podcast by City and State Florida, hosted by Dara Cam, produced by Ryan Dailey, and music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs LLC and performed by Ryan Dailey and Danny Reyes.